Hi, I'm EyeOnAiman, and welcome back to one of my FischerTechnik videos. In today's video, we're going to get started with programming with the RoboPRO software. So first, let's set up our ROBO interface. So get your ROBO interface out, a serial cable, and the power supply, and let's connect them. So first, your power supply gets plugged in, and then your serial port gets plugged into your computer. Alright, so once that's plugged in, we'll set that aside, and then we'll open up RoboPRO. Alright, so now we're going to open up RoboPRO on our computer. So make sure to open it up from RoboPRO, not FischerTechnik Robotics Terminal. And it's going to open to this screen. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your COM connection is correct. So click COM/USB. Make sure that your interface is the ROBO interface. Then click USB/WLAN/Bluetooth. Click OK, and then click Test. Now, if there is no ROBO interface found on the USB, make sure that the power is connected. Make sure that the serial ports are connected, and if you might have faulty wires, so make sure you replace the power supply or the serial port. In this case, I'm going to try replacing the serial port, serial cable, because it looks like the power supply is already running correctly. And so I'll try using this cable. And let's see if that works better. Okay. So now let's try testing it. There we go. So it looks like we had a faulty cable. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to set up your ROBO interface. So as we discussed in our previous videos, there are a few things to look at here. Our inputs, so those are things like buttons. Our outputs, which are things like motors. Our analog inputs, which are things like light sensors and bead sensors. And our distance sensors, which we might not get to. So let's set that aside for now. And we're going to start a new program. So click New. All right, and then we're going to save our file as a test file. And if you are using this from a school computer, make sure that you save this file later in like Google Drive so you can access it later. So test. And now we're going to play around with a few of the programming elements. Okay, so before we proceed, I want you to gather a motor, a switch, a light, and a photoresistor. Now this is a special piece that detects light level. And there's also another type called the phototransistor, which I do not have right now, but I will put a picture. And we will use these to test our inputs and outputs on RoboPRO. So first off, let's wire them together. So with the motor, very simple. On your RoBo interface, locate M1, M2, M3, M4, and wire a pair of wires to the M1 column, and then wire it to the motor. Alright, and then we're just going to put that motor on the base plate. Alright, and then I want you to take a light and then connect a pair of wires to the light. And then we're going to also connect them to a motor slot, because these are an output. And so we're going to put this on the side of the motor. And the idea is we want to have this shining on the photoresistor. And we'll get to that in a bit. But first off, let's wire the switch in. So the switch is actually pretty interesting because you can wire it in two different ways. according to this diagram right here. So obviously the first thing that you want to do is connect the so obviously you want to connect one of the wires to this middle port, but depending on which port you choose next, your default position will either be open or closed. So because this says that the left port is default closed, we're going to wire it to the other port because we want it so that when the switch isn't pressed, it's an open circuit. Okay. And then you want to take your ROBO interface and you actually want to wire it to the input rows. So one pair goes there. And there we go. And it doesn't matter where you put the switch. We'll put it on the other side of the motor. Lastly, the photo resistor. This is very simple. It's also a input, but instead of putting it in the I row, you're going to put it in the A's. So you have A1, A2, AX, AY. You're going to wire up to any one of these. We'll choose AX, I believe. I'm not sure if A1 and AX have a difference. I forgot. But we'll see when you get there. So wire this up. One pair here. One pair here. And we wire it up to A1. Alright, so opening up the test interface, first let's check that the motor is working. So the motor is put in output row 1, so we're going to toggle clockwise to see that it's running, and counterclockwise to see that it's running perfectly. You can adjust the speed here too. And there we go. Next step is to test the light. So turn it clockwise or counterclockwise, doesn't matter. And you can adjust the intensity as well. Very cool that you can adjust the dimness of this. Then lastly, and then next, we want to test the switch. So you want to take a look at the inputs right here. And you should see, when you press the switch, it reads as an input that is checked. Now, if you wired it to the other side of the switch, something very cool is that it automatically reads as a closed input until you actually press the switch, at which point it opens. Very cool. Okay, and then you want to go to your photo resistor. Now this is very tricky.
A few moments later.
Okay, so the photo resistor is very finicky, but as you can see, it does detect the light level of wherever the sensor is facing. The way you can try this is cover it in darkness, and you can see that AY goes to completely 1000. If you let in a little bit light, it goes down to 192. That's not a little bit of light. Okay, a little 256. Let's try closing that off a bit. 520. 900. So as we let go of that, you can see it slowly decrease. Or not slowly decrease. This is very old technology. And as it gets in full light, it eventually drops down to like 0. Or close to 0. Is it going to? Alright, 64. If you shine something really bright on it, then it would go down to 0. Or it would go down to less than 10.